When you are new to security operations, it can be tempting to believe that the main problem is that humans are too slow, and that the solution is to automate everything. Automation can absolutely help, but only when it is applied thoughtfully, because security decisions often happen under uncertainty and mistakes can be costly. SOAR is a term you will hear for security orchestration, automation, and response, SOAR, which describes systems and processes that coordinate security tools and automate parts of response workflows. The promise of SOAR is that it can reduce repetitive work, speed up consistent actions, and help teams respond faster when the same kinds of events happen again and again. The risk is that automation can amplify errors, trigger unnecessary disruption, or create a false sense of safety if the automation is not designed well. Thoughtful SOAR is therefore less about speed for its own sake and more about choosing the right scope, building guardrails that keep automation safe, and ensuring humans can override and guide decisions. For beginners, the simplest way to frame it is that SOAR should make good decisions easier and bad decisions harder, even when things move quickly. Automation scope is the first concept, because scope determines what the system is allowed to do and what it is not allowed to do. In security operations, there are many steps in a typical response flow, such as collecting initial context, validating whether an alert is likely real, enriching information with asset data, and taking containment actions. Some of these steps are safer to automate because they are low risk and mostly about gathering information. Other steps are higher risk because they can disrupt users or systems, such as isolating an endpoint, blocking an account, or cutting off network access. A thoughtful approach begins by mapping which tasks are repetitive, predictable, and reversible, because those are often good candidates for automation. It also identifies tasks that require judgment, context, or business trade-offs, because those tasks usually need a human decision. Beginners sometimes imagine automation as replacing the analyst, but in practice, automation is more often about removing the tedious parts so the analyst can focus on the decisions that actually require thinking. Scope is what keeps you from building an automation that is powerful but reckless. A useful beginner mindset is to divide automation into assistive automation and decisive automation. Assistive automation gathers and organizes information quickly, such as pulling the recent login history for a user, collecting the process tree for an endpoint, or checking whether a file hash is known in your internal records. Decisive automation takes action that changes the environment, such as disabling a user account or blocking a connection. Assistive automation is generally safer and can be broadly applied, because if it makes a mistake, the main cost is wasted time or incomplete context. Decisive automation can be extremely valuable, especially when speed matters, but it must be tightly controlled because mistakes can cause outages, lock out executives, or interrupt critical business functions. Thoughtful SOAR usually starts with assistive automation and then expands into carefully selected decisive actions once the team understands the patterns and risks. For beginners, this helps you avoid the common trap of trying to automate the biggest actions first because they feel impressive. The most valuable automation often starts with the most boring steps, because those steps happen constantly and consume attention. Guardrails are the second concept, and guardrails are the safety mechanisms that keep automation from going too far or acting on weak evidence. Guardrails can include conditions that must be met before an action is taken, such as requiring multiple independent signals rather than one low-confidence alert. They can include scope limits, such as only taking certain actions on non-critical endpoints or only during certain hours when disruptions are less damaging. They can include approvals, meaning the automation prepares an action, but a human must confirm it before execution. They can also include rate limits and circuit breakers, meaning the automation stops or slows down if it is triggering too often, because a sudden spike might indicate a logic flaw or a widespread event that requires human coordination. For beginners, guardrails are like the safety features in a car, such as brakes and traction control, which make speed safer but do not remove the need for a driver. The goal of guardrails is not to weaken automation, but to make it trustworthy and predictable. When guardrails are missing, teams often turn automation off after a few painful mistakes, which wastes the potential benefits entirely. Another important guardrail concept is reversibility, because the easiest way to reduce automation risk is to prefer actions that can be undone. For example, Temporarily restricting access is often safer than permanently deleting something because you can restore access if the action was mistaken. A related idea is staged response, where automation starts with low-impact actions and escalates only if additional evidence appears. A staged approach might begin by collecting evidence and notifying an analyst, then escalate to a temporary containment action if the situation looks more serious. Guardrails also include clear logging of what the automation did and why, because accountability matters, especially when automation makes changes. If an account was disabled, you want to know what triggered it and what evidence supported the decision. For beginners, it is valuable to recognize that guardrails protect both the organization and the security team because they reduce the chance that security is blamed for disruptions caused by automation. Guardrails also build trust with stakeholders because people are more willing to support automation when they believe it will not act recklessly. Human override is the third concept, and it is essential because security operations include uncertainty, nuance, and changing conditions that automation cannot fully anticipate. Human override means humans can stop, pause, or modify automated actions when context suggests that the default automation path is wrong. This includes the ability to cancel an action in progress, to reverse a completed action, and to adjust the logic for future cases. Human override also includes the ability to handle exceptions, such as when an alert targets a system that must stay online or a user whose access cannot be interrupted without a coordinated plan. For beginners, it helps to see human override as the steering wheel, because automation can help you move faster, but you still need the ability to change direction. Override is not a sign that automation failed. It is a recognition that automation is part of a larger decision system. In a mature program, override is expected and supported, and it comes with documentation so the team learns when and why overrides happen. That learning is how automation becomes smarter over time. Human override also implies that roles and responsibilities must be clear because someone must have the authority to override automation, and the criteria for overriding should be understood. If anyone can override at any time without accountability, automation becomes inconsistent and loses value. If nobody can override quickly, automation can cause harm during unusual circumstances. Thoughtful design often includes defined escalation paths, such as allowing analysts to pause automation for a specific case, while requiring a senior decision-maker for high-impact changes. It also includes clear communication pathways so that when automation takes a significant action, the right people are notified promptly. For beginners, it is important to connect override to trust, because trust is what keeps automation enabled. If the team believes they can safely stop automation when needed, they will be more willing to let automation handle routine tasks. If they fear automation will run unchecked, they will keep it locked down, and the potential benefits will remain unrealized. Applying SOAR thoughtfully also means being careful about what you assume automation can know. Automation can handle logic based on data it receives, but data quality varies, and some decisions require context that is not in the logs. For example, an automation may see a login from a new location and interpret it as suspicious, but the context might be that the user is traveling for a conference. If automation disables the account without considering that context, it creates disruption and erodes trust. This is why thoughtful automation often focuses on speeding up information gathering and helping humans see context quickly rather than making high-impact decisions on thin evidence. It is also why guardrails might include checks against asset criticality, known maintenance windows, or approved travel records, if those signals exist. For beginners, the key lesson is that automation is only as good as the data and assumptions behind it. Thoughtful application means being honest about uncertainty and designing automation to behave safely when uncertainty is high. Another critical idea is that automation should be measured and improved using evidence, not just enthusiasm. You want to know whether automation reduces response time, reduces workload, and maintains or improves decision quality. If automation speeds up actions but increases false positives, it may harm the program overall. If automation reduces analyst effort but causes frequent disruptions, it may be unacceptable to the business. Thoughtful teams track outcomes such as how often automation actions were later reversed, how often analysts overrode automation, and how often automated steps shortened investigation time. These measures help the team tune scope and guardrails and decide where automation should expand or shrink. For beginners, it helps to see automation as something you manage like any other control, with goals, monitoring, and adjustment. The idea is not to automate for fun, but to automate for measurable improvement. When improvements are measurable, it becomes easier to defend automation investments and to earn trust from stakeholders. It is also useful to recognize that SOAR can create its own operational risks if it is not maintained properly. Automated workflows depend on integrations and data sources, and those can change when systems are updated or when log formats shift. If the automation breaks silently, it can create gaps where the team assumes actions are happening, but they are not. If the automation behaves incorrectly due to a change, it can produce a wave of wrong actions. This is why thoughtful application includes maintenance practices, such as testing workflows, validating assumptions, and monitoring automation health. For beginners, it helps to see automation as another system that must be monitored because it becomes part of the critical response chain. Maintenance also includes documentation so that the team understands what automations exist, what they do, and how to adjust them. Without documentation, automation becomes a fragile black box that only a few people understand, which increases risk and reduces resilience. Thoughtful SOAR is therefore not only about building workflows, but about keeping them reliable over time. To make the concepts concrete, imagine a high-volume alert type like repeated failed logins on an account. Assistive automation might gather the user's recent successful logins, check whether the source addresses match the user's normal patterns, and collect any related alerts from the same time period. A guardrail might require that there is also a successful login from an unusual source before any containment action is prepared. A human override might allow the analyst to mark the event as expected if the user is resetting a forgotten password or if an internal system is misconfigured. Over time, proof from investigations can refine the automation, perhaps adding checks that recognize known internal systems that generate benign failures. The point of this example is not the specific scenario, but the pattern of thoughtful design, narrow scope at first, guardrails that reflect risk, and human control to handle exceptions. For beginners, this pattern is a safe mental template for how to apply automation without causing harm. It turns SOAR into a helper that improves consistency and speed without removing human responsibility. When you step back, applying SOAR thoughtfully means building automation as part of a balanced decision system, not as a replacement for thinking. Automation scope defines what tasks are suitable for automation and where humans must stay in control, especially for high-impact actions. Guardrails make automation safe by requiring strong evidence, limiting where and when actions occur, and ensuring actions can be stopped or reversed. Human override preserves flexibility and accountability, allowing the team to apply context and judgment when the situation does not fit the usual pattern. When these elements are aligned, automation reduces repetitive work, shortens response cycles, and increases consistency, which helps the team focus on the harder problems. When they are not aligned, automation creates disruption and mistrust, which often leads to automation being disabled and ignored. For a brand new learner, the most important takeaway is that the best automation is careful automation, because security is not only about moving fast. It is about making the right decisions quickly, safely, and repeatably, even when the situation is uncertain.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.